There is no old bridge house without the old bridge. The old bridge, also known as Devergilla Bridge, dates back to 1431 as a stone structure, though a wooden structure has been here since the 13th century. It hasn't always looked like this. The old bridge house wasn't the only building on the bridge. On the eastern side there were two houses. They were demolished, along with three of the bridge's arches, when the White Sands was developed in 1795. This tree of life design was above the threshold of one of those houses. We are fortunate that the old bridge house was on the opposite side of the river. The old bridge house was built in 1660 by James Birkmeyer, a barrel maker. It was built to be his house and workshop. The construction was controversial. The council asked James Birkmeyer to move it back due to fears it would block the road over the bridge. He had to leave some boulders outside to stop traffic from clipping the corner of his new building. At the time of its building, Bridgend was a small village on the edge of the pilgrims' route to Whithorn. It was also, crucially, not part of Dumfries, lessening the taxes Birkmeyer would have to pay. But this did mean it had a certain reputation. The people were drunken delinquents and out with the jurisdiction of Dumfries. The place had a notoriety that is hard to imagine now. While the old bridge house is the oldest surviving domestic building in Dumfries, its location west of the river means it was, historically, part of Galloway. The area west of the river, known as Maxwellton, wasn't part of Dumfries until the two boroughs merged in 1929. It also hasn't been exclusively used as a domestic building. After Birkmeyer, the building became an inn and would have been visited by Robert Burns in his role as an exciseman before being converted back into a house in the 19th century. By the 20th century, it had been converted into two flats, one upstairs, one downstairs. The last resident of this room was a woman known as Granny Black. It's her framed photograph that stands on the mantelpiece by the decorative plates and jug. Annie Lind, the maiden name of Granny Black, raised 6 children here in the 3-room upstairs flat without running water or electricity. Later, she assisted in the delivery of children and the laying out of the dead, but she is most known for sitting outside the front of the old bridge house, knitting and greeting passers-by. This room is what a typical parlour of the time would have looked like, with its bureau, sewing machine and teapot. Granny Black spent the best part of 50 years living in the upstairs flat of the old bridge house, only leaving in the early 1950s when the house was no longer fit for living in. She died in 1955 at the age of 86 as the matriarch of Maxwellton. It was shortly after Granny Black died that the building was converted into the museum it is today. If you had visited Herbert Dyke's dental surgery in Dumfries in the late 19th century, it would have looked like this. His equipment was donated to the museum and it records an interesting moment in time in the history of dentistry in Britain, just after the profession became legally regulated. From this point, one could be given a filling, safe in the knowledge that the dentist doing the drilling was qualified to do so. However, this didn't mean it was entirely safe. Next to the chair is the anaesthetic equipment, with which the dentist dispensed laughing gas to numb the patient's pain. This, in its early incarnation, was a notoriously leaky piece of technology. By the end of the day's exposure to the leaking laughing gas, the dentist could be more affected by it than the patient. By the end of a career in dentistry, they could be addicted to the gas. In the display case, you'll see some of the smaller equipment a dentist of the time would have used. Some tools have barely changed, like the dental mirror and probes. The false teeth are similar, though these were made of ivory. Nowadays, false teeth are more likely to be made of a synthetic material. In the final cabinet are the wince-inducing pliers used for tooth extraction. Downstairs in the museum, we move away from the public to a more domestic setting. Here we have a kitchen, bedroom and children's playroom from the end of the 19th century. When Granny Black lived upstairs, it was the Hannah family that made their home here in the lower flat of the old bridge house. The kitchen dates back to 1850 and is full of items that would have been essential to running a happy, hygienic household before electricity. From the metal tub that the entire household would wash in, to the washboard that the clothes would be scrubbed on, to the mangles used to wring them dry and the irons for smoothing the creases out. The old Bridge house did not have running water, so it's likely that these items wouldn't have been used here. It was hard to be hygienic in this house. There were wash houses on the other side of the river that the inhabitants here would have used instead. We know that Granny Black would go there with Mrs. Hannah every Tuesday. The best tub was always reserved for Granny Black. The range here is more rudimentary than the one upstairs in Granny Black's parlour. Still, it was adequate. The cast iron frying pan and the stew pot would have seen plenty of use. What stands out in the kitchen, to a modern observer, is the permanence of these items. The earthenware pot, used for keeping perishable items fresh, could be used today. The gadgets of the time, the irons, the coffee grinder, the mangles, are all made of extremely durable cast iron. These items came from foundries across Britain, from West Bromwich to right here in Dumfries. Next door is the bedroom, a room styled to be from 1870. The brass and iron bed occupies a large corner of the room with its comfortable mattress of wire and horsehair, blankets and warming pans for the cold nights. For the style-conscious parent of the period, we have an example of an early trouser press propped up against the wall with its bold slogan of being the baggy knee annihilator. At the foot of the bed there are two babies' cradles, one of solid wood and the other an ornate rattan style, demonstrating a high quality of craftsmanship. An early high chair is tucked into the corner. For a family to live in, it would have been a cramped bedroom. Next to the bed is a wooden washstand with two ewers, large decorated jugs with wide spouts, standing one on each shelf. The lower ewer was manufactured by John Bell of Glasgow, who built throughout the 19th century a successful pottery business, which eventually employed up to 800 people. Sadly for John Bell, the collapse of the City of Glasgow Bank was a blow to him personally. He died in debt, and though the business was sold still solvent, it folded in the early 20th century. When the children get too old for their cradles and high chairs, they have the children's room next door. Again, this room is slightly later in period than the others. The collection of dolls, models, toys and books date from around 1900. Fiction took off in the 19th century and reading became a popular pastime. You'll see works by the Edinburgh-born novelist Robert Louis Stevenson on the shelf here, whose stories did much to encourage children to read, and J.M. Barrie, who lived in Dumfries as a child and attended the local school, Dumfries Academy. Below you'll see a collection of antique dolls. The doll has been a child's plaything since at least 2000 BC, but only produced commercially with porcelain heads since the mid-19th century. The other cabinets in the room contain children's trinkets and playthings, including stereoscopes, a miniature Singer sewing machine and a magic lantern. But it's not all fun. There's an abacus for learning sums, and a schoolmaster's lectern, and two desks that came from the New Abbey School, a reminder of the obligatory schooling to come. Old Bridge House is a treasure chest and a time capsule. From the building itself and its unique position on one of Dumfries' most visible historic constructions, to the contents within that preserve the memories and experience of what life was like in the 19th and early 20th centuries here in Dumfries.